Good evening. We are going to tackle one of the most persistent and frustrating myths about the medieval period, the idea that everyone dropped dead around age 30 or 40. It is a very common conception that people before modern times died very young, often in their 30s. When you look at the raw statistics for the Middle Ages, you will indeed find that the average life expectancy for a person born then was generally cited as being somewhere between 30 and 40 years. However, if we approach this from a myth-busting perspective, we must emphasize that this single number, the average or mean life expectancy, is incredibly misleading and tells you almost nothing about the typical lifespan of an adult. Myth-busting point 1. The statistical illusion. The primary reason this average life expectancy number is so low is due to one overwhelming statistical factor: outrageously high infant and child mortality rates. In the medieval period, the 0 to 15 age range was when people had a vastly higher chance of death than they do nowadays. The sources suggest that half of all children died before their 5th birthday. Let's look at how this mathematically skews the average. Imagine an unlikely family with 10 children. 5 of those children die very young, perhaps between ages 1 and 5. The remaining 5 children all live to be between 60 and 64. If you average all their ages at death, the calculated life expectancy for that entire family is only 32.5 years old. This exercise proves that reducing life expectancy to a single average figure doesn't make sense, as it tells you pretty much nothing intuitive. Many argue that the median or mode value would be a much more accurate figure to reflect the typical lifespan. Myth-busting point 2. The adult lifespan potential. The major myth we are busting is that everyone only lived to 35. This simply wasn't the case for those who survived infancy. If you managed to live past the age of 15, your chances of reaching a relatively old age increased dramatically. Some sources suggest that if you lived past 15, you had pretty much the same chance of reaching 60 as today. Even reaching 70 was not uncommon. For the top strata of society, such as royalty and religious orders, evidence suggests that 40 to 60 years was around the average once they made it to adulthood. Getting to 80 or 90 was still very uncommon, even for the richest, but 60 was certainly attainable. Nuances and caveats: the adult danger. While it is a myth that everyone died at 35, we must also avoid overstating the case. Medieval life was still drastically shorter and more precarious than modern life, even for adults. The notion that if you lived past 15, you had the same chance of reaching 60 as today is likely an overstatement. We must remember that medieval adults still faced a constant roll of the dice every year that could cut life short. Infection and disease. The biggest killers were infections, wounds, and general diseases. Without modern medicine, a simple cut, a chest infection, or a condition like appendicitis, which has a high incidence rate, could be a death sentence. There were no vaccines or antibiotics. Pandemics. The average lifespan was drastically reduced by major catastrophic events. Pandemics like the bubonic plague devastated Europe on multiple occasions, sometimes leading to mortality rates of 50 to 60%. The risks for women. While men might die in war, though sources debate how often peasant men actually fought, women faced a specific mortality spike: childbirth. The mortality rate from childbirth was estimated to be around 3%, or 3,000 per 100,000, a figure described as crazy high. The risk was especially high during first births, and subsequent pregnancies added cumulative risk. A lack of sanitation, midwives and doctors not washing their hands, led to fatal infections. Social status. For the vast majority of the population, the peasants, 85 to 98% of the population, life was still harsh. They faced poor diet, famine, and farming accidents, and were likely lucky to hit 40. The key to busting the "everyone died at 35" myth is to understand how life expectancy is calculated. The low average reflects the heartbreaking reality of high infant mortality, not the inability of the human body to endure. The medieval period was less a slow march toward an inevitable early death and more like a series of high-stakes survival tests. If you passed the gauntlet of infancy, avoided childhood diseases, survived the risks of childbirth or war, and evaded a fatal infection from a minor wound, a lifespan well into your 50s or 60s was entirely possible.